can come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Although you might not notice them when walking down the street, enclosures house critical electrical, telecommunications, gas, and water service connections. Each installation and application is different, but a few installation guidelines should be followed to minimize field damage and help ensure many years of use. The following video will step through the 4 main points of a typical field installation of an underground enclosure that is smaller than 24 inches by 36 inches. An installation with a concrete collar will also be shown. To ensure a successful installation, it is important to comply with federal, state, and local laws and any applicable building codes. A successful install begins at the storage yard. Properly handling and transporting an enclosure to the job site will ensure that the enclosure is not damaged and the finished product performs as intended. After carefully unloading the enclosure on site, survey and secure the job site, hold a safety briefing, and note the slope of the ground. In this example installation, directional drilling equipment was used, so shallow pits were dug for the conduit prior to the enclosure crew arriving on site. Measuring the depth of the hole, excavate 6 to 8 inches deeper to provide room for the crushed rock. Move the enclosure and the cover to the site in a manner that minimizes any damage to the enclosure. Regularly check the depth of the hole in relation to the grade of the surrounding area. Prepare conduit runs to understand how all components will fit into the box. Measure the conduit to determine cuts prior to placing the enclosure. Position the small enclosure and note any incoming conduit paths. If additional crushed rock is needed, rather than removing the box, you can add rock and lift the enclosure. This process might need to be repeated several times until the box is level. Clear any rocks from the lip of the enclosure and remove any bolts prior to installing the cover. If the box needs to be cut to accommodate existing conduit paths, use a diamond tip masonry hole saw or a cut-off grinder. When cutting, do not cut the enclosure's corners and do not remove more than 25% of any sidewall. When removing a cut piece, use gloves to avoid getting fiberglass shards embedded in your hands. Knockouts and terminators can be pre-installed at the factory to safely install the cover and do not drop it. Rough handling of covers during installation can cause the lip of the box to chip and can damage the cover. Ensure proper soil compaction so that surrounding soil does not sink over time. This crew temporarily marked their completed enclosures with conduit stubs so they could quickly audit their finished job site. Site plans might specify that a concrete collar is to be poured around the enclosure for cosmetic reasons, for extra security, or for additional strength. Begin by creating a form and adding gravel to the base. A cutaway view shows the layers below the concrete ring of an enclosure. The concrete apron should be a minimum of 4 inches thick, but can fill the space between the top lip of the enclosure and the gravel base. This contractor is installing a high-security quasi lockbox enclosure. So he first installs the inner metal jacket and then lifts the outer polymer concrete box into place. He checks for level as he adds each part of the assembly. The installer checks the spacing of the box in relation to the form. concrete is poured into the form. The boxes are covered with plywood to avoid getting concrete on or in the enclosure during the pour. The concrete is smoothed with a trowel, edges are finished, and extra rock and concrete is removed prior to curing. The concrete is allowed to cure, and covers are added to complete the installation.